Okay, so a couple of days ago, I made this post here about Warhammer 3's launch. It went well at first, but then some Warhammer fans came in, got a bit confused, so naturally, I now have to make a video where I dumb it down for the Warhammer fans. I'm joking, I like Warhammer too, I'm joking. It's just a joke. But I still do want to explain my point because I don't think I got it across correctly. I don't think I explained the theory correctly, I'll say so. I'm going to quickly try and explain it now if anyone is interested. Just a very simple video on why I've gone from positive about the next historical to negative about the next historical, and why it's all based on Warhammer 3's launch. Oh, hold on, forgetting something. There we go, now I'm cool. Alright, let's say the next historical. Let's say it's Medieval 3, not Medieval 23. Medieval 3, just for simplicity. Now, the issue is, right now, a lot of the historical fans, as you probably know, are very unhappy. They feel they've been put into a box, shoved in the corner, and CA is never going to come back. Not all of them, but a lot of them feel that way. And, as discussed in my top 10 CA marketing failures video, rightfully so. This is not the historical community being super whiny and annoying to deal with, although at times we kind of are. This is more of a mistake by CA, and I want to really get that across. This is their fault, not yours, not ours. Okay, so CA ignoring us has made a lot of us very upset, and out of the sadness has come a lot of anger from the community, and this is why I think the historical fanbase and the Warhammer fanbase are so aggressive towards each other. One has it all, the other has next to nothing in the modern day and age, and, you know, if you do some weird experiments with monkeys, like, you know, you get the same result. The two get toxic and aggressive towards each other. It doesn't work, and it's a very, very bad decision made by CA. Right now, the historical community is in all-time lows. It's not looking good. And because we've been starved, if you will, because there's anger, because there's sadness and a massive lack of historicals, and now that we're at the lowest point we have probably ever been at, Medieval 3 needs to have a very good launch. It needs to be perfect on launch. If it's any less than what the majority of people want out of Medieval 3, it's going to heavily fail. Player base is going to drop off. Medieval 3 has got to exceed expectations. If it doesn't, then the player base is going to fall off very quickly. It's going to get review bombed, it's going to get hate, and the toxic side of the community is going to get even worse, and there'll be no coming back from that, in my opinion. The entirety of historical Total War, if Medieval 3 flops or whatever the next historical is, I think will be done at that point, and it all needs to be decided on the launch. Why? Because let's look at Rome Remastered. Rome Remastered had an awful launch, but it had a lot of great stuff and great mods added to it since that launch. However, at the launch it went up, it spiked, it went down, and then it remained flat. I think Warhammer 2 has a very different audience. I mean, I know it has a very different audience, but they were more like it had a spike, it went down, and then it sort of like recovered and it had another spike at one point, and yeah, now it's looking kind of good. Although dipped a bit because of Warhammer 3, but let's just ignore that. Overall, Warhammer 2 did much better. The difference is, I think, the Warhammer community is much more forgiving than the historical community, so that allows it to push up as CA adds stuff. But with Rome Remastered, every time there was a new patch, fixing a load of the issues or a new mod, the player base never really went up. We see this with near enough all of the historicals too. The player base just sinks and then sort of stabilises. You might get a few spikes every now and then in the older ones, but you don't get that much anymore. Which is why the launch of the next historical is going to be so important. The next historical has got to retain as many players as possible, so it will go up, and then it will come down, but it needs to catch it and then hold it much higher. Because from what past experiences has told us with historicals, it's very difficult to then get that trending upwards again and holding at a new high. That has only happened with Warhammer 2. Now, I think that will happen with Warhammer 3 as well. So ultimately, with Warhammer, you can argue it's about how good it gets over time, but I don't think the next historical is going to work the same way. So this dip here for fantasy is okay, but the issue is with a historical, as proven with Rome Remastered, this dip here is not okay. It needs to hold on to as much player retention as it possibly can. And that is what makes relaunch so important. For the next historical, it's not going to be decided by how good the DLC is, or the patch 1.1. It's all going to be decided in that first few days. If it is successful then, maybe it might stabilise nicely. Maybe it might even have a comeback at some point. That would be good to see. I do think that is possible with the next historical, but only if it has a good launch. Otherwise it's going to go down, and then it doesn't matter if Medieval 3 becomes the greatest Total War of all time, with loads of content added in. I don't think the player base will forgive them if Medieval 3 is not perfect on launch. So let's now have a look at all the latest titles. What did we have? Thrones, Three Kingdoms, Troy, Warhammer 3, and of course, Rome Remastered was made by Feral. Do I put that in there? You know what, sure, let's put it in there anyway. And let's mark them based off their launch. Bad launch. I am not talking about sales. I am talking about if people are going to enjoy it or not. And if people enjoy it, and it gets good sales on launch, then it can hold its retention higher, and then it has potential. But in terms of these games here, Thrones did not do that. That was more like Rome Remastered's. Three Kingdoms, more like Rome Remastered's but not as bad. Troy, definitely down, although we don't have the full data. Rome Remastered, that went down. And Warhammer 3 is also heavily going down. If we go by review percentages, it is the most disliked Total War to ever exist right now, and it even has the highest drop-off rate of players, whereas Warhammer 2 actually held on to much of their players, much better than Warhammer 3 did. But given that Warhammer 3 has now failed, that pushes me to believe Warhammer 2's launch as a success when it comes to player base and the player's retention was actually a one-time fluke that we might never see again. I have a chart here of Warhammer 3 so far, and what it was meant to do with a launch of these numbers is, yep, it's gonna go down, but by about this point here, it should be starting to even out a little bit, but that's not what we see. What we're seeing is it's still going down. It started to stabilise a bit, although still dipping, showed some promising sign here, but then no, it is still going down. And I believe we could potentially see it maybe have a bit of a rise here, but still ultimately keep on going down. And remember, as I said, it doesn't matter if Warhammer 3 someday does, shoot up with Immortal Empires and becomes the greatest Total War of all time. That doesn't matter for this argument. I think Warhammer 3 is going to come back and do well. But the point of this argument is, if Medieval 3 had a launch like this, the historical community is far less forgiving, and by this point, doesn't matter how good the game is, that's not going to happen. It will only keep going down. So what Warhammer 3 represented to me was hope. The chance that we could get a Total War that could launch well and retain its players. Because this is what Medieval 3 needs to do to be able to survive. This is what historical Total War needs. And I've been sort of on the fence lately. 50% of me thinks it will fail, 50% of me thinks it will succeed. But the main bulk of my argument saying Medieval 3 will succeed is because I thought Warhammer 3 was going to have a launch more like this, not like this. So even if they cannot get Warhammer 3 right, a game that they are making the third instalment of in the last decade, surely they should have got that right. But the fact that they didn't makes me think that Medieval 3 will have a great launch, and CA will make a lot of money. But ultimately, it will go down to nothing, and I don't think it will ever climb back up because of how the historical community is, how we feel, how we are, etc. And that is what I mean when I say I no longer have that much hope in the future of historicals. The only thing making me stick by it has basically just been disintegrated. CA cannot have a good launch that can retain the retention of its player base, which is what Medieval 3 is going to need more than anything else. But I wanted to make that post and later this video to help explain the main background behind the theory on why I have now lost near enough all hope on the future of historicals, because in conclusion, the success of it all depends on that first 3, 4, maybe 5 days. If those days are not good, if the reviews aren't high, if the player base is falling off, then 50% of Total War, arguably even more because historicals are cheaper to make as we don't have to pay copyright stuff, I think CA has then lost, and lost it to new up and coming possible competitors who will start taking big chunks out of their market. So I guess this is a warning to CA in a way. CA, get your launch right. Perfect. Otherwise I think you're gonna lose quite a lot. That's my warning to you. My warning to the historical community is, you know, be prepared for something like this. Just because Medieval 3 gets announced does not mean it's going to be good. I think Medieval 3 will eventually be a great game or whatever the next historical is. But given the current situation the historical fans are in, if it does not launch well, I don't think it's going to make a comeback. And if that happens, I don't think CA is going to give it the support it needs, and that's going to hurt future historicals later down the line. So, you know, be very careful is what I'm trying to say. To basically near enough everybody. And, you know, I've been right about a lot of this stuff before. I am a very, very, very smart guy. I have an IQ of 51. Most of you average about 100. That means my IQ is 4 times higher than yours. Think about it. I hope I was able to get my point across. This is a very unscripted video. I don't want to do many more unscripted videos like this, but I had to just get the point across. So, hope you learnt something, and for now, MELKOR.